What if a single act of kindness could change the fate of two worlds? When a quiet hiker offers a simple scarf to a mysterious girl in the forest, he unknowingly triggers a cosmic bond that could reshape reality itself. Shadows begin to stir. Ancient forces awaken, and the line between Earth and the unknown starts to blur. This isn't just a story. It's the beginning of something far greater than anyone imagined. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and show some love with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now, let's jump into the story. The morning had begun like any other in the quiet town of East Ridge. Nolan Reyes zipped up his jacket, slung a small backpack over his shoulder, and locked the door behind him. The sky was clear, and the cool air of early morning filled his lungs as he made his way toward the forest trail. It wasn't the first time he'd escaped into the hills, and it wouldn't be the last. Nolan liked the stillness. Out here, he could forget about work, bills, and the noise of everyday life. It was just him, the trees, and the steady rhythm of his boots on the dirt path. The forest greeted him with rustling leaves and scattered sunlight filtering through the branches. Birds chirped in the distance, and the breeze carried the scent of pine and damp earth. For a while, everything felt exactly as it should, quiet, peaceful, untouched. Nolan walked with no destination in mind, just a desire to let his thoughts wander and settle. The trail twisted and turned, leading him deeper into the woods until the tall trees grew closer together and the light dimmed. Then something shifted. He noticed it slowly. First, the birdsong faded. The usual chorus of chirps and fluttering wings fell silent, as if the entire forest had paused. Nolan stopped walking, his eyes scanning the woods. The wind, too, had died, leaving behind a strange stillness that pressed against his ears. It was the kind of silence that made your skin crawl, not loud, but heavy. Something was wrong. He told himself it was nothing. Maybe just a drop in air pressure or a coming storm. But even as he took a deep breath, the unease in his chest only grew. That's when he felt it, a faint hum beneath his feet. Subtle at first, like a car engine rumbling in the distance. But there were no roads out here, no planes overhead. The sound grew louder, vibrating through the ground as if the earth itself were breathing. It was steady, mechanical, and strangely rhythmic. Nolan's heart skipped. Curiosity warred with instinct. He thought about turning back, just heading home, and pretending none of this ever happened. But something deep inside nudged him forward. This pulled him off the main trail and into the undergrowth. Branches tugged at his sleeves as he pushed through the thicket, drawn toward the sound. The forest opened into a clearing ahead, and what he saw there stopped him in his tracks, dot in the center of the clearing. Nestled between twisted tree roots and soft moss was a structure unlike anything he'd ever seen. It wasn't a cabin. It wasn't a tent. It was a ship, or at least, that's what it looked like. Metallic and smooth, the vessel shimmered faintly under the sunlight, pulsing gently with a glow that seemed to come from within. It was disc-shaped, seamless, and clearly not of this world. Nolan didn't move. He just stared, wide-eyed, trying to make sense of it. The hum was louder here, vibrating the air itself. For a moment, he thought maybe he was hallucinating, or dreaming, or both. But it was real. The cold air, the scent of ozone, the taste of electricity on his tongue. It was all real. Then something moved. From behind the craft, a figure emerged slowly. Small, fragile, and unsteady, it stepped out into the light. Nolan held his breath. It looked like a girl, maybe his age, maybe younger. But she was different. Her skin was a soft shade of turquoise, almost glowing, and her hair floated like silver threads in the windless air. She wore no armor, no helmet, just a plain garment that looked torn and singed. Her eyes, large and luminous, locked onto Nolan's the moment she saw him. There was no fear in her gaze, only pain and confusion. She took a shaky step forward, and Nolan could see that her knees were buckling. She was hurt, injured, maybe scared. And somehow, without really thinking, he took a step forward too. He didn't ask himself if it was safe. He didn't wonder if she was dangerous. All he knew was that she needed help, and no one else was here. Digging into his backpack, Nolan pulled out a scarf, just a regular old scarf he'd thrown in for warmth. He held it out slowly, unsure if she'd understand. Her eyes dropped to the scarf, and something in her expression changed. It was subtle. A flicker of emotion, like recognition. Her breath hitched. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the fabric like it was something sacred. Nolan swallowed hard. It was just a scarf, just a simple human gesture. But to her, it seemed to mean something more. Then she looked up at him, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The forest was silent. The hum was still. And Nolan felt something, some invisible thread stretching between them. In that moment, everything changed, and he knew, without a doubt, that his life was no longer his own. Nolan sat on a moss-covered rock at the edge of the clearing, watching the strange girl with turquoise skin cradle the scarf in her hands. She hadn't said a word since he offered it to her, but her expression said enough. She turned it over carefully, feeling the fabric between her fingers like it held some hidden truth. Her glowing eyes flicked toward Nolan every few seconds. Not with fear, but with wonder. He didn't know what to say. His heart was still racing, and his mind was spinning with questions he didn't know how to ask. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why, out of all places, had she ended up here? The humming from the ship had faded, leaving behind a heavy silence. Only the rustle of leaves in the distance reminded Nolan that the world was still turning. The girl finally looked up at him, her voice soft but clear. "You don't know what you've done," she said, almost like she was talking to herself. Her accent was unfamiliar, strange, but gentle. Nolan leaned forward. "I didn't mean to do anything," he said. "I just thought you looked cold." She nodded slowly, then held the scarf closer to her chest. "That's exactly why it matters," she whispered. She stood slowly, her legs still shaking slightly, and took a few careful steps toward him. Nolan stayed where he was. He didn't want to scare her. When she stopped just a few feet away, she looked at him with a mix of curiosity and sadness. "On my world," she began, This is not just fabric. It is a sign of unity, a bond." Nolan blinked, confused. "A bond?" She nodded. "It is given only during moments of great meaning. Acts of kindness are not taken lightly where I come from." He tried to wrap his head around her words. A scarf. A simple scarf he'd tossed in his backpack that morning without a second thought. Now it was something sacred? "I didn't know," he said quietly. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No, but it still happened. And now I am linked to you." Nolan's eyebrows furrowed. "What do you mean linked? Like, you feel connected to me?" She hesitated before answering. "Yes, not just emotionally. Something deeper. I can feel you, your energy, your thoughts." Her hand hovered near her heart. "Your world is inside me now." Nolan looked down at his hands, unsure of what to feel. Part of him wanted to run, to shake off whatever this was, and pretend he'd never come into the forest. But another part, the deeper part, was drawn in, like the moment he first heard the hum beneath his feet. "Why me?" he asked finally. "Why would something like this happen with me?" She looked up at the sky for a long moment before replying. "There is an ancient belief among my people," she said softly, "that one day a bridge would form between our world and yours. A connection made not through science, but through something pure, something real. She turned her gaze back to Nolan, her eyes glowing a bit brighter. You acted with kindness, without fear. That's what created the bond. It chose you. Nolan felt a chill crawl up his spine. This sounds like a story out of a book, he said with a nervous laugh. Like a prophecy or something. The girl's expression didn't change. It is, she said, a very old one, passed down for generations. Nolan looked around the clearing again. The trees, the ship, the way the light seemed to shimmer, it all felt unreal. So what now? He asked. What happens because of this bond? She lowered her eyes. Things will change. For both of us. The merge is beginning. Merge? Nolan echoed. She nodded. Our worlds had been drifting closer for a long time. But the final step needed a spark. A gesture. Yours was the one. Nolan ran a hand through his hair, overwhelmed. I didn't ask for any of this. I know, she said. Neither did I. They stood in silence for a while, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. Nolan wanted to believe this was just a strange dream, that he'd wake up in his bed and forget the whole thing. But he couldn't. Not with her standing there, real as anything. She walked slowly back to the ship and placed the scarf on a small ledge near the hull. As soon as the fabric touched the surface, the glow around the ship pulsed brighter for a moment, then faded. She turned back to Nolan, her face calm but serious. There are others who will sense what has happened, she said. Not all will. Want the connection to continue? Nolan's stomach turned. Others? Guardians of balance. Watchers, they will come. Some will try to break the bond. Nolan swallowed hard. Why? If this connection is good, why stop it? Her voice dropped. Because it changes everything, and change is feared. He didn't have an answer for that. He just stared at her, wondering how a simple act of kindness could turn into something so big. She looked back at him, as if reading his thoughts. We have to leave this place soon, she said. Before the others arrive. Nolan nodded slowly. He didn't know where they were going, or what waited ahead, but he knew one thing. For sure, this was just the beginning. The forest was no longer the quiet, peaceful place Nolan had known. Something had changed. The trees felt taller, the shadows deeper, and the air held a strange tension, like it was waiting for something to happen. Nolan walked beside Kellen, his eyes darting through the twisted branches. Every few steps, he looked back over his shoulder, feeling like someone or something was following them. The hum from her ship had faded behind them, but the energy in the air still buzzed around. His skin like invisible static. Kellen walked ahead in silence, her movements graceful but cautious. Her eyes flicked upward every so often, scanning the sky through the leaves. Nolan could see that she was worried. He didn't need to ask why. She had warned him. Others were coming. Beings who didn't want their worlds to connect. Who would try to stop it before the bond became too strong. Nolan didn't understand exactly what this bond had done to him, but he could feel it growing. Sometimes he'd catch flashes of her memories, pieces of a world he had never seen. Other times, he could sense her emotions before she said a word. It was like an invisible thread connected them, tightening with each passing moment. They reached a quiet ravine where the ground dipped and the light barely reached through the thick canopy. Kellen stopped and held up her hand, motioning for silence. Nolan paused, listening. At first, there was nothing. Just the sound of his own breath. And softly, from the trees above, a whisper. It wasn't made of words, more like wind sliding across stone, but it sent a chill through Nolan's bones. Kellen's eyes narrowed. They're near, she said quietly. Nolan turned in a slow circle. Who exactly are they? He asked. You said guardians, but that doesn't tell me much. Kellen didn't answer right away. Her gaze was locked on the shadows. They protect the balance, she said. Between worlds, between realities. When something threatens that balance, they respond. Sometimes with reason, sometimes with force. Nolan swallowed hard. And they think we're the threat? She nodded. The bond we formed. It was not expected, not by them. They will see it as a crack in the wall between two worlds. A weakness, and they will try to seal it before it spreads. Suddenly, a low groan echoed through the trees, like the forest itself was sighing. A shape moved in the distance, tall, dark, and shifting, as though made of smoke and glass. Nolan backed up instinctively. That's one of them? He asked, his voice tight. Yes, Kellen said. A warden. The figure stepped closer, and though its face had no clear features, Nolan could feel its attention locked on him. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. The pressure in the air was enough. It was like being judged by something far older and far more powerful than anything he'd ever known. Kellen stepped in front of Nolan. He is not the enemy. She said to the warden, her voice calm but firm. The bond was not forced. It came from truth, from choice. The warden didn't move, but the shadows around it began to ripple, spreading like ink in water. Nolan felt a strange sensation in his chest, like his heartbeat was echoing into the trees. A wave of dizziness hit him, and he stumbled. Kellen reached back, catching him by the arm. They're trying to test you, she whispered, to see if you're strong enough. Nolan gritted his teeth, trying to steady himself. Test me how? She didn't get a chance to answer. The warden suddenly raised a hand, and the ground beneath them cracked with a bright flash. Light surged between the trees, and images flooded Nolan's mind. Cities burning, worlds collapsing, people screaming. Visions of destruction terrifying, vivid, and overwhelming. He fell to his knees, gasping. What is this? He managed to say. Kellen dropped beside him, her hand gripping his. It's fear, she said. They want to break your will, to show you what could happen. Nolan closed his eyes and forced himself to breathe. The images swirled, pulling at him like a storm. But somewhere inside, he remembered the moment he offered the scarf. The way Kellen had looked at him, not as a stranger, but as someone who mattered. That moment had been real. No force, no fear. Just a choice to help someone in need. He held on to that memory like an anchor. When he opened his eyes, the warden was still there, but the shadows had stopped moving. Kellen stood again, lifting her chin. He is not your enemy, she repeated, and neither am I. The warden tilted its head slowly, as if considering her words. Then, without warning, it turned and vanished into the trees, melting into the mist. The forest was quiet once more, but the tension lingered. Nolan got to his feet, still shaken. That was one? He asked. Just one? Kellen nodded. There may be more. Or worse. They kept moving, deeper into the forest. Nolan didn't know where they were going, only that they had to keep ahead of whatever was coming next. The bond between them had started as a gesture of kindness. Now it had become something far greater, something powerful enough to draw the attention of ancient beings. And yet, for all the fear and mystery, Nolan felt a strange sense of determination rising in his chest. He hadn't asked for this, but now that it had started, he wasn't going to run from it, not anymore. The forest was no longer just a forest. As Nolan and Kellen stepped into the wide-open clearing ahead, it was clear the world around them had changed. The trees were glowing faintly, their trunks veined with threads of pale blue light. The ground shimmered like dew had frozen mid-air, and large stones hovered inches above the earth, spinning slowly in silence. Above them, the sky was no longer just blue, it rippled like water, and at the center of it all was a glowing crack. In the sky, a tear between worlds. The rift. Kellen stopped walking and turned to Nolan. Her eyes glowed brighter now, their violet light pulsing in sync with the energy in the air. "We're here," she said quietly. Her voice was calm, but Nolan could feel the weight behind her words. This was the place. This was the moment everything had been building toward. He felt like he was standing at the edge of something massive, something alive. The bond between them tugged at his chest, soft but insistent. He looked up at the rift and felt a pull, like a hand reaching through the sky just for him. Kellen stepped closer and held out her hand. "The bond is complete," she said. "What happens next is your choice." Nolan looked at her, unsure. "I don't understand what I'm choosing," he said. "Do I go through that thing? What's on the other side?" Kellen's gaze drifted toward the rift. "Another world. My world. But it's not just about travel. The merge will connect our people, our thoughts, our histories. It's more than a doorway. It's a joining of everything." He swallowed hard. "And if I don't go through?" Her expression softened. "Then the connection weakens. The rift will close. The bond between our worlds will fade. My people will wait again. Maybe for another 100 years. Maybe forever." Nolan looked down at his hands. He was just a regular guy. No training. No magic powers. Just a quiet life, a job he wasn't passionate about, and a weekend habit of hiking into the woods. He never imagined anything beyond his small corner of the world. But now, the weight of two worlds hung on his decision. A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, and a voice echoed from the trees. It wasn't Kellen's, and it wasn't human. "He does not understand the price," it said. A figure stepped out from the shadows. It was another warden, tall and still, with eyes like mirrors. "If he steps through that door, there is no return," the warden warned. Kellen didn't move. "He knows that," she said. The warden's gaze locked on Nolan. "Do you know what she is?" it asked. "What her kind has done?" Nolan looked at Kellen, confused. She didn't look at him, didn't speak. The silence said more than words. "What do you mean?" Nolan asked. The warden pointed toward the rift. "This bond has happened before, long ago. Her people created a link with another world. It ended in fire. They speak of unity, but their presence changes everything. Culture, energy, nature. The last time, it destroyed more than it saved." Nolan's heart pounded. He looked at Kellen. "Is that true?" She finally met his eyes. "It is," she said softly. "But I am not them. I came here not to take, but to understand. To ask, not to force. That's why the bond chose you." Nolan felt a storm inside him. Every step that had led him here rushed back into his mind. The scarf, the glowing ship, the warden's test, the dreams, the visions, the forest glowing with magic he didn't understand. All of it. He didn't know what was right or wrong anymore. But he knew what he felt. That this wasn't just a choice between yes and no. This was about trust and belief. Not just in Kellen, but in himself. He reached into his bag and pulled out the scarf once more. It was faded now, touched by starlight and memory. He held it out to her. "This started everything," he said. "A simple gift. That's all it was." She nodded. "But it became more." Nolan looked toward the rift, then let this end with a gift too. And before she could respond, Nolan turned and walked toward the rift alone. Kellen's eyes widened, her hand reaching out, but she didn't stop him. She understood. This was his path to walk. Nolan stepped into the glow, and the light swallowed him whole. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then the rift pulsed once, twice, and slowly it began to close. Kellen stood there, motionless, her hand still in the air. The scarf fell gently from her fingers to the glowing grass below. Behind her, the warden said nothing. There was no judgment, only stillness. Weeks passed. The ship remained untouched in the forest. The glow faded. The trees returned to silence. Back in the town of East Ridge, life carried on. But sometimes, at sunset, if you stood in the right place on the edge of the forest, you could see something just for a second. A shimmer in the air, a flicker of light between the trees. And if you listened closely, you might hear a hum. And in a small house on the edge of town, a man named Nolan sat by his window, watching the stars. His eyes were no longer brown but glowed faintly with a violet light. He didn't say much. He didn't need to, because he carried two worlds now, and both had just begun to awaken.